makes up the entire picture. Well, let me just say, got that. These pieces are continuously adjusting to one another, but are all connected. These pieces are kind of like systems, and they're interlinking. Language is part of the system and is interlinked to biodiversity. That's connected to hydrosystems and so on. Another part is economics. These are all connected. You see here that food security goes far beyond nutrients and calories. It includes spirituality, feasts, and much more. A challenge arises when some come and look at only one piece of this puzzle. They might just come down here and just look at this ice, or only look at that beluga, or just look at these berries. And then they decide to make policy recommendations off of what they think is happening. But they're doing this without an understanding of the interconnecting pieces and what cumulative impacts are. To make decisions in this ecosystem, it is important to understand and pay attention to relationships. It is important to understand that the health of this hunter depends on the whale, but also that the health of the whale depends on the health of the hunter. Indigenous knowledge tells us here that the greatest points of vulnerability lie with where these pieces connect on these relationships. If these pieces begin to separate, to not connect, there is a large problem. Some of you may recognize this to be similar to an ecosystem perspective, but we like to suggest that this goes beyond an ecosystem perspective. This concept is coming from Indigenous knowledge, where humans are part of the ecosystem, and where relationships, again, that focuses on the relationship, not just putting pieces together. So let's jump back to what is food security. This is about a worldview. It's about all of life. Their project in this report, Alaskan Inuit Food Security Conceptual Framework, how to assess the Arctic through an Inuit perspective. Inuit in Alaska have developed a food security definition and conceptual framework. Now, this definition is long because it encompasses all of life. And I'm not going to read the entire definition here, but I really encourage everybody to read it, and not just read it, but really think about it, really think about what does this mean. But I will read the first sentence. Food security is the natural right of all Inuit to be part of the ecosystem, to access food, to caretake, protect, and respect all of life, land, water, and air. Now, I want to point out something I'll point out a couple of times in this presentation is that we're all coming from different languages and trying to translate really complex concepts into English. And so I want to point out that when we say natural right here, it's not saying like, this is mine. This is talking about a right to a responsibility. This is talking about a right to take care of. Now, as I shared before, this work also created a conceptual framework. The conceptual framework shares all of the components that are needed to make up food security. So this is depicted as a drum because the drum is what connects all of Inuit and is important within the culture. In the center here, you have food security. That's the health, right? Surrounding that is what characterizes food security. That's a healthy environment. But to have a healthy environment, we need these components: accessibility, availability, culture, stability, health and wellness, decision-making power, and management. To support those components, we need knowledge sources, meaning both Indigenous knowledge and science. We need policy. We need true co-management. I'll come back to that part in a moment. And then you see on the outside of the drum there, these words here, they all equate to meaning the spirit of all, or some variation of that. And they come from the 4 main Inuit dialects utilized in Alaska. This is like Sinu holding the drum together. This is really important because we can't separate out spirituality from the rest of this. Now, holding the drum up is the person holding the drum and connected to all of this, and that's food sovereignty. What's really important here is that without food sovereignty, we can't have food security. Now, the authors, the contributing authors, there's about 160 contributing authors and hundreds of Inuit reviews of this work. And one thing that they felt was really important to always share when sharing this drum is that if even one piece is not stable here, if even one piece is being out of the drum, then we're not going to have a healthy environment. I just want to point out again that point about English. Now, again, these are complex concepts. It's important to understand what they mean and not to assume what the words mean. And so for that, I would encourage you to take a look at the report, because an example here is health and wellness. If you do kind of a Google Scholar search on health and wellness, you'll get a lot of information about human beings. But here, Inuit are talking about the health and wellness of everything, of humans, of whales, of plants, of the air, the water, everything, and even that relationship between all of it. So we cannot look at one piece of the puzzle to understand the Arctic. You have to consider all the pieces and how they interlink with each other and the importance of understanding cumulative impacts. This concept map may aid us in understanding what these pieces are that need to be included and what relationships we need to focus on. This concept map puts together these relationships. And one story that the authors like for us to share in this situation is in just thinking about a walrus and what a walrus hunter might need to know. What are the things to understand about walrus and to observe and pay attention? And some of those things are sea ice thickness, sea ice movement of currents, the taste of the salt in the water, the taste of the salt in the air, the movement of the air, the color of the tusk of the walrus, the thickness of the fat of the blubber, the color of the blubber, the color of the meat, the contents of the stomach contents in the walrus stomach, because people rely on the clams within the stomach of the walrus also. But it is also paying attention to the young person being taken out every year to learn their relationship with that walrus. And at the point that that walrus gives itself to that young hunter, and the young hunter brings back their first catch and shares it with an elder and shares it with the community. Now, this is a point of self-identity, of community identity, and it all has to be considered collectively. All of this information is needed to make a decision. So why is this important? This is what we call a food security lens. It allows for us to see the entire picture, the entire puzzle. We are often asking different questions to inform monitoring, understand the environment, and both are needed. As a quick recap, these systems are comprised of connections among the health of people, animals and plants in different lands, seas, and airs. Within the Inuit knowledge system, it is impossible to disentangle some of these relationships. When we discuss an Inuit food security perspective, it is this interconnecting and these relationships that we refer to. Today, we have a holistic understanding. We need both, in order to have that holistic understanding, we need both Indigenous science and, Indigenous knowledge and science. We need that co-production of knowledge. And we'll come back to that part in just a moment. We do have some examples of co-production of knowledge. There's a lot of Indigenous-led co-production of knowledge, and this is really important work to look at in order to understand a strong approach to co-production of knowledge. So for this, we'll just jump back to food security for a moment. Within Alaska, it was voiced loudly that when doing the food security work, that the greatest threat to food security is a lack of decision-making and power. This is important because, again, it all relates back to the health of the Arctic. The authors of the food security report stressed that even if one piece is out, then we're not going to have that healthy environment. The drummer holds the drum by the handle, and the handle holds up the drum. In this conceptual framework, the handle is food sovereignty. Remember that without food sovereignty, we will not have food security. For this reason, one of the recommendations from the food security report was to look at the management structures applied in other Inuit countries to see what could be learned from them. And that led us to a project and a report that we released last year entitled Inuit Food Sovereignty and Self-Governance, Inuit Role in Managing Marine Resources. Through the utilization of Indigenous knowledge methodologies, social science methodologies, legal analysis, this report comes together to demonstrate the strong connections between food sovereignty and all of these pieces, from language to biodiversity, to human rights, to international law, to climate change, to monitoring, self-determination, and overall collective ecosystem health, understanding the Arctic, and much more. Through this project, we looked at the management and co-management structures within Alaska and the Inuvialuit settlement region of Canada to understand how those governing frameworks support or need to be modified to achieve Inuit food sovereignty. Really, we were looking at what supports or impedes Inuit food sovereignty. In this work, food sovereignty is defined as the right of Inuit to define their own hunting, gathering, fishing, land, and water policies, the right to define what is sustainable, socially, economically, and culturally appropriate to maintain ecological health, and the right to determine ecological and culturally sustainable practices for the distributions of foods, the right to define their own food system, and to maintain identified practices for obtaining, processing, storing, and consuming traditional foods. We have worked with our partners to facilitate multiple focus groups, workshops, and to conduct individual interviews. Our partners were the Eskimo Walrus Commission, the Fisheries Joint Management Committee, the Kuskokwim River Intertribal Fish Commission, the Inuvialuit Game Council, the Association of Village Council Presidents, and advised by our office in Canada. Again, we have held focus group meetings in the Inuvialuit settlement region and also within Alaska. And we had collective meetings within Alaska for participants from all over partners to come together for face-to-face discussions. During these meetings, participants continuously stressed the need for youth involvement and that Inuit have their own rules, policies, and practices. With this in mind, we facilitated an additional meeting titled the Youth Elders Active Hunters and Gatherers Meeting. And it brought together over 50 Inuit from across Alaska and the Inuvialuit settlement region. And we'll jump back to that in just a moment. Now, the Food Sovereignty and Self-Government Report provides transformative recommendations, barriers, key findings, important Inuit perspectives on international instruments such as free, prior, and informed consent, Inuit values, management practices, and much more. The recommendations are listed under 8 common themes. Please take a close look at these in the report. Under each of these themes, there are calls to actions, recommendations. I hope that these recommendations look a little familiar to people, because I have to say that people are saying the same thing for decades. They have Indigenous peoples, Inuit, and many Indigenous peoples have been providing the same recommendations. It's really important that they start being utilized. Now, internationally, there's such a call with this term, transformative change. The way we would get to that transformative change is by starting to enact these recommendations that have been being provided, this guidance that has been being provided. The authors further stress a co-production of knowledge in which Indigenous knowledge and science are brought together equitably, that this is essential for understanding the Arctic as well as for adaptive holistic decision-making. The report also offers rich discussions about many components that food sovereignty relates to, and also about Inuit management and important points that relates to co-production of knowledge, such as language. Authors provide discussions and examples relating to language to food sovereignty. For example, they shared, there is a challenge when people are not able to use their own language in management discussions. Consider talking about beluga. Within one Inuit dialect, there may be 4 or 5 words for beluga. Each of these words describes a different age, different relationship the beluga hold with the environment around them, describes what the beluga is doing or how you should engage with the beluga. When we have a discussion in English and are only saying beluga, we leave out an immense amount of information needed to make a holistic decision. And this work has further informed the Inuit Food Sovereignty Initiative, an initiative being facilitated by the ICC Alaska and led by my colleague Vernay Anabubwak. This initiative is developing an Alaskan Inuit Food Sovereignty Management Action Plan that advances traditional resource management practices. Please look at our website for more information about this. The action plan is going to be released by next month. To jump back to what Inuit have put forward in the food sovereignty and self-governance work, As shared before, Inuit have stressed strongly that management is not new. Inuit have had rules, policies, and practices from time immemorial. How to maintain balance within the environment, how to hold relationships with everything else within this environment is not new. Here you see a list of some of these that were shared throughout the project. This is not an exhaustive list, but offers an example of the many rules and practices followed to this day. Practices such as never take more than you need, use all parts of the animal, that cannot waste any part of that animal. Notice that some of the key elements of these pages include honesty, cooperation, and many other points you may not expect. These also relate to how we may think about co-production of knowledge approach, how we treat each other. Through these discussions, additional points are stressed through an Inuit worldview. For example, Inuit approaches also requires adaptive decision-making. If the weather is raining and going to cause the drying fish to mold, you will need to change when you get the fish, or how you are processing the fish. A challenge arises when regulations conflict with the Indigenous knowledge and what Inuit are observing. There is often a challenge when management and regulations that are driven solely by one dominating culture and one source of knowledge, regulations, or decisions that separate people from their environment, and decisions made far from Indigenous knowledge with no understanding of adaptive, quick decisions that need to be made for the well-being of the entire ecosystem. It is important to understand how differing values, different ways of knowing, different ways of seeing the world guide management, decision-making policy, and how this affects the entire environment. For example, Inuit management practices are not single species focused. There is a strong focus on cumulative impacts, understanding relationships between components and multiple variables, a holistic understanding of food security lens. These management practices were also the focus of the Youth Elder Active Hunter and Gatherers workshop. Through this workshop, Inuit from across Alaska and the Nunavut settlement region came together to talk about our relationships within the Arctic, our relationships with everything we interact with. The people attending the meeting decided to title the workshop report, "The Role of Providing," and to share selected Inuit management practices. These practices are what is needed at the forefront of all management discussions, not to be advice, not to be a side box or a side discussion, but actually leading the discussion. You might have noticed that throughout, while sharing about these different projects, I've tried to emphasize different ways that we've come together, because that's another important part about how we're doing this work. We're doing it through Indigenous approaches, through what feels like common sense to us. But we're trying to make sure that everybody's taking off their hats and just thinking about being at the kitchen table or being out on the land and just having conversations with each other and doing things the way Inuit do them, not the way other people are saying to do them. This allows for the work that comes out to be truly reflective of those values. Jumping slightly to another tool that we have developed with colleagues, Rochelle Daniels and Julie Raymond Yakovian. This is a framework for co-production of knowledge in the context of Arctic research. This conceptual framework provides the components we feel are needed for a co-production of knowledge approach. This approach is rooted in equity. What's very important to me is that this work comes from so many Indigenous people, the work that people have been doing for decades, the values rooted in many Indigenous cultures. So please note the authors listed include Yom Chua, because this information does not belong to one person and does not come from one thought. It is guided and informed by all of us within the world and belongs to all of us. How we think of this type of work, how we interact with each other and within our environment is guided by our worldviews and our values. This includes how we even communicate through papers like this. Now, thinking about co-production of knowledge, what we decide to work on, what questions to ask, and how we can conduct that work to create these products is all determined by how we are taught to see the world, how we are taught to take information in. Through Indigenous knowledge, people are often asking different questions than science. Indigenous knowledge is different than science, and that is good. We need both. Co-production of knowledge approach rooted in equity will aid in bringing together Indigenous knowledge and science to provide a holistic understanding and informed decision-making. To have a co-production of knowledge approach, we understand that we need an equitable table. That table or platform is needed for Indigenous knowledge and scientists to work alongside each other from the beginning to end, from the design stage, deciding what work is needed, what questions to ask, through to the analysis and implementation, results and communication. This requires trust and respect. Trust that we all know what we are speaking about and have the ability to analyze our own information, and respect that each of us comes to the table with our own credentials needed to be there. For some, this may be degrees and publications. For others, this may mean a lifetime as a hunter or being an elder. There's a lot to this, and we would be happy to have a discussion focused just on these topics. But there's one more bit of work that we would like to share with you that is connected to this point on equity. Through all of this work, consistently, Inuit have stressed points about lack of equitable and ethical practices continuously. There are thousands of examples and stories to be told about discriminatory practices, dismissiveness of knowledge, unethical practices, and pain. And I'm being very gentle on those words that we share today. Some of this is touched upon within these reports, but there are also endless examples of Inuit providing solutions to address common challenges. The world is increasingly focused on the Arctic, and there are many changes and challenges arising or have been here. Many of these challenges are resulting from the lack of equitable engagement in decision-making, policy development, and the diverse activities occurring across Inuit Nunat. While these concerns may look different across Inuit Nunat, they are the result of decades of top-down approaches that inhibit the equitable and ethical involvement of Inuit voices, knowledge, and values. In recognition of these continuing challenges and with a desire to provide guidance, the 2018 ICC Utqiagvik Declaration directed ICC to facilitate the development of the Circumpolar Inuit Protocols for the equitable and ethical engagement. I'll just refer to them as the E protocols after this. There's an increasing number of efforts placed towards developing similar protocols through different institutions internationally. But if protocols and guidelines to engage us are primarily written from the perspective of non-Inuit or non-Indigenous peoples, we'll continue to face many of the same challenges that we do today. Over the past few years, we have been working on developing the Circumpolar Inuit Protocols, or the E protocols, and they'll be released next month. Today, you are the very first outside of ICC to see this draft cover. I hope many of you will see it next month. So to develop the protocols, again, this process is so much important. This process seems to me to be more important than the products often, because that's how we get those values guiding our work. So to develop the protocols, we began by developing a synthesis report of Inuit produced materials and voices that include existing rules, laws, values, guidelines, and protocols for engagement. It's not exhaustive, but it does have over 80 reference points in it from across Inuit Nunat. We also facilitated a series of workshops that brought together Inuit delegates to discuss the topics and what is needed to be included. So this work is also informed through decades of Inuit input to governments, international fora, negotiations, ICC-led workshops, meetings, discussions, conferences, and projects occurring across communities, regionally, nationally, and internationally. I hope that I'm really stressing the point that none of this work is done in a vacuum. It can't be done without everybody's collective efforts. The resulting protocols are reflective of Inuit values. While we need to wait until June 2nd to release the protocols, we can share that there are 8 protocols, and they're entitled the following: Nothing about us without us, always engage with Inuit. Recognize Indigenous knowledge in its own right. Practice good governance. Communication with intent. Exercising accountability. Building trust. Building meaningful partnership. Information, data sharing, ownership, and permission. And equitably fund Inuit representation and knowledge. Okay, phew, that was a lot of work to go over. And hopefully this presentation has shown the importance of Indigenous knowledge-driven work that is reflective of values and solutions to aid in moving away from the top-down structures that have been imposed through hierarchical approaches and towards the many solutions that Indigenous peoples hold and have been applying for thousands of years. We encourage you to read all of these reports that we have put forward, and you can access them on the webpage. And I forgot to send it, but I do for this, for anybody interested, I do have a quick resource page that I can send to you if it's helpful. And you're also always very welcome to contact me directly. So with that, again, I'll say Koyana Teku.
Awesome, Koyana. Carolina, it's so beautiful, all that work. I just am always amazed by the number of really impactful publications coming out of ICC Alaska. And as you said, the strength of those publications is in the input and the amount of work that ICC Alaska did to learn from elders across Inuit country, not just Alaska, but across the countries that are our homelands. And I love that the author of the paper on co-production of knowledge is Tlamua, along with you and Rachel and Julie. So, I mean, it just shows that traditional knowledge is not coming from a single person. It is the accumulation of knowledge from thousands of years of experience on the land, including that individual's own experience on the land and the community's knowledge about the environment and animals. So just thank you for all that work. And I would love to hear thoughts from the audience, questions for Carolina, or just thoughts you'd like to hear or to share with her. And you can raise your hand or put things in the chat or just unmute.
I just want to say that was beautiful. I'm glad that this council is still going.
Thank you, Tia. And there is a question from Dr. Dan in the chat early on. He asks, what about monitoring and evaluation using a two-eyed seeing approach? Is this feasible?
Oh yeah, yeah, without a doubt it is. This is so extremely important. And I'm sure there's a lot of you here that would have something to say about that too. I could just quickly add that a lot of this work that we've done with this food security lens internationally has been used to educate and guide international monitoring initiatives to explain what it means to have a food security lens. What that really means is, how do you have this holistic view? How can you see? So the same like when we told that story about the walrus, you need to see all of those pieces. You need to understand all of those pieces, and you need to be monitoring that. Indigenous peoples have been monitoring their environment for thousands of years. Just nobody says, I'm going to go down to the river to monitor today. But that information is being taken in and documented, and it has its own methodologies, it has its own approaches. And so to bring together the science and the Indigenous knowledge, I think what's really important is to respect that those communities have had their own approaches in bringing in their own knowledge for thousands of years, and that needs to be utilized as well. I think it's unfortunate when there's approaches that just assume that science has the only thing on the market for monitoring, because we're not going to understand anything with that only approach. Yeah, but I bet you so many of you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, thank you. I see Daryl's hand is up. Daryl, go ahead.
Thank you, Shemai, Carolina. I appreciate it. I was wondering if you could relate a little bit. This kind of ties back to the other 5 sessions that we've had here. How do you see the food security tying in with, and I hate to use the term land management or urban planning, but the tie that many of the traditional food gatherings have generally been a transitory. You move where the food is, and where the food is not, you move away from it. But now with the various aspects of, say, ANSC and various other things that do not allow for Native population, Indigenous population to transit, how are they going to do this? How can we make this mix together? I'm actually working on a paper on this myself, so I'm very interested in how you see it. So, Kuyana.
Oh yeah, Daryl, I'm not completely sure I understand because like if you go to Utqiagvik, everyone's getting their traditional foods still, but they live in Utqiagvik. But so I'm not sure I completely understand.
I think there's some other places. Right now, I'm doing a focus on Shishmaref. But some of the other Western Alaskan places have tended, and when I say tended, from what I've researched, over the last 3,000 or 4,000 years, have tended to be more migratory rather than sit here in this one location, fish here, hunt here, and that's it. That's all you can do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Daryl. Okay. Thank you.
Clarifying.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Actually, my boss is from Shishmaref and Kelly Inuit, right? And so it's a really, really beautiful place. I think what I can offer is just a couple of things. What's always stressed to me is I think Inuit, like many Indigenous peoples, are very resilient and adaptive, and they have continued to be adaptive. Right now, there's a lot of changes happening, like shifts in animal migrations, along some of those places you talked about. Ugruk and walrus might be coming at the same time, and they might not get along that well, right? Or people are having to choose between should they go Ugruk or should they go to get berries, because things are happening at different times and people are adapting. I think what's really important here is the decision-making process, the co-management process, the management process, the food sovereignty part of it. And I think that we maybe need to put some really strong focus on self-determination and sovereignty, and really recognize that Indigenous peoples have solutions. They need to be supported in making the decisions that they already know how to make. Because right now we have federal, state, and territorial laws that are contradicting those decisions of how to adapt. Not only is that extremely harmful to those communities, it's extremely harmful to those animals, to that environment in that area, and to the rest of our world, because it's all so interconnected. So one just major example, just one, and this is just one little thing, is single species management. This world got sidetracked on single species management, and it's destroying things. What is one of the easiest things we could do is to learn from people on multi-species management and how to be adaptive and holistic in how we're looking at it. So I think there's so much there, and not really a lot that I could just, without taking up 5 hours right now. And obviously I'm a bit impassioned about it as well. I'm sure many of you are too, but there's just so much there. And I think, again, we really need to focus on that sovereignty part and really start looking at how we have systemic racism and biases within our laws and policies that are affecting us being able to move forward to address what we say are our common concerns.
Wonderful. Kuyana.
Yeah, and that just emphasized Lauren's comment in the chat about wishing that conservation agencies and philanthropic organizations would fund projects that are more community-based and less single species based. So thank you for making that point as well. Tia, yes, your hand is up.
Yeah, I joined the Indigenous Foods Committee that the Alaska Food Policy Council put together, because they knew that they needed Indigenous voices, they're creating a 10-year food security plan for the state of Alaska. With the state of Alaska, they did a study that found that Alaska Native people are the most food insecure. With the state of Alaska, they hired a company to do research on how to address the food insecurity in Alaska, and their #1 recommendation was subsistence. I've been trying to tell them that they should be working with tribes as partners and moving forward on food security, and they don't understand. I mean, there's a lot of good things they're doing, but it's that systemic, they don't understand. I said, the federal programs have tribal conservation or tribal consultation that they're supposed to do. So they came back with, we're not the government, but I'm just gonna keep showing up, and trying to get information in there on, the most local food is the food right outside your door. Yes, we've had to adjust for the colonization of the state. I live down here in Kenai. So, the poor tribe here had to settle for an educational fishery rather than their traditional fishery because of all the outside interests. And we're not trying to, like you said, take over all of the food sources, but trying to keep those important food sources, on the menu, and the fact not just Native people, but many people living in Alaska live off subsistence, live off hunting and fishing. And because it's political or they're afraid, they're not putting that on the table as something that needs to be nurtured, that we need to come up with some solutions together to continue to have those animals, those fish, the plants around. And there's tens of thousands of years of stewardship that the Native people have to bring to that table. And so, even though we can't do government to government relationship with the Alaska Food Policy Council, show up. I put a link in there, ask questions, because they are working with the state to make this 10-year plan. And we need more Native voices in that plan, or we're going to have to do our own thing. Yeah.
Janan, Tia, that's really important work, and I know we are all appreciating you for the time and commitment into that. And yeah, please keep spreading the word about it so we can help out here in the world and send in comments or whatever needs to happen. So thank you, Tia. Well, with that, I'm going to say Koyanakva to Carolina. Thank you so much for being here. You're welcome to stick around for the entire rest of the class, and I'm sure people would love to engage in conversation with you. And next is a really cool presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Carrie to introduce them.
All right, wonderful. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm using the Atna Intertribal Conference Room. Yeah, getting the...
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much, Carolina, for all of the amazing work that you are doing at ICC and this Indigenous-led work in land use, food security, food sovereignty, and community engagement. So a lot of those links were shared in the chat for all of you. And I just really encourage you to read them, to look at them, so we don't all need to recreate the wheel and we can move forward. One of the things that was noted here in the AITRC room was the first author of the report, being the creator. And this movement, just like Indigenous-led planning within Indigenous-led academic research, authorship, and papers, looking at who are the lead authors listed on documents and kind of walking that talk. So I just want to say Koyana as well for that, Carolina, and all of those examples. There's so many pieces to them. As well as ICC, I'm so excited and grateful to Ralph Wolfe and his team to share with us the work they're doing in Southeast that's led by tribes and Indigenous voices. So a big Gunishish and Hawa to Ralph for him bringing his colleagues along with him. Ralph is Tlingit and Haida, an Eagle Frog of the Kuksadi clan, and of course a lifelong Alaskan, born and raised in Craig on the Prince of Wales Island. He currently lives in Yakutat with his wife Gloria and sons Jackson and Jace, and serves as the director of the Sustainable Southeast Partnership. And he serves in many roles as well, including tribal leadership, and has served on the Executive Council as a Vice President of Central Council, Tlingit and Haida, I believe for 6 years. Ralph can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's been about 6 years he's been on the Executive Council. So he brings tribal leadership to the table as well. He's represented the tribe with the United States Forest Service, Sea Otter Steering Committee, Indigenous Peoples Council for Marine Mammals, IPCOM, on Rural Cat, among many other roles, including a catalyst for the Sustainable Southeast program, mayor of Yakutat, working for the tribal offices there as well. So Ralph is very engaged in his community, in his people, and in his tribal sovereignty. So again, a Gunishish and Hawa to Ralph for sharing the work that they're leading within the Sustainable Southeast Partnership today. And with him today, he has also brought Marco Banda, and he is the Regional Resource Specialist at Central Council, Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. Often we just say Central Council. Marco's primary role is in the development of the Southeast Alaska Indigenous Guardians Network. Over the past decade, he has gained valuable experience developing and maintaining strong partnerships with Southeast Alaska tribal communities and environmental work groups. And with them, they also have Mike Goldstein. He is a planner and biologist for the U.S. Forest Service in Juneau. Mike has worked on many applied management issues across terrestrial and aquatic systems, addressing pesticides, dispersed recreation, timber harvest, and other forms of resource extraction. Mike's current role in the Alaska region includes planner and inventory and monitoring coordinator. In his spare time, Mike has been publishing large volumes of work as co-editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia of the Anthropocene, Encyclopedia of the World's Biomes and Imperiled, the Encyclopedia of Conservation. He also coaches skiing, enjoys fishing and camping in remote places, and teaching his 3 children. So I do want to hand it off to Ralph and say Gunishish and Hawa for all of his years of leadership and service to his people and all people of Southeast. So with that, Ralph, I appreciate you bringing your team with you today and sharing you with us how the work is done in your region.
Koyana, Carrie, Koyana. Yeah, I was prepping for this, thinking about how to go forward with the presentation here, and I think I brought back an oldie but goodie and kind of reformed how our conversations go at the SSP in a couple different ways. But I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me the time and the space and the introduction, Carrie. I appreciate it. And Crystal, I missed both of you on the island somehow on Prince of Wales this last weekend, and I'm very bummed about that. We were in the same place, but there's too many happy faces around. So I apologize for that. And with that, I'll jump into my presentation here. Okay. Oh, it's not in presenter mode. Sorry, a sec. There we go. Can you guys see it?
We're seeing the
Okay.
presenter view, but so I wonder if you need to switch screen.
Oh, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Maybe.
There we go. Looks good.
Sorry, I thought I had it set up. That doesn't show me my notes. So.
Sometimes
Thought it was presenter view. Is that not how I do it?
advanced settings on Zoom.
What's that?
Sometimes with Zoom, if you go to the little arrow that's next to the share screen button and it says advanced sharing options, you can share a portion of the screen that will still let you see the notes, but only show us the slide. But you had it a second ago where it was just the slides.
Yeah, but it didn't have my notes on it. Let me try one more time here. Stop the share real quick and pull it up in presenter view. Sorry about this. Okay, well, this is not working. Try it like this. See what happens. Back there again to show everything, right?
Yeah, we're seeing
Is it
the
still on
notes
everything?
and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, if it was only so easy.
I know. Sometimes I have to do it on two different screens, and then when I share, I choose the screen that's just the PowerPoint and not the notes. But that's if you have two screens, I guess.
If I had two screens right now, I don't right now. Anyway, I think I can do it without it.
Or you could
Now
send
just
it.
the slide?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, here we go. So I guess where I wanted to start is taking you on a journey through Southeast Alaska. The place I was born and raised, the place I come from, the place where my ancestors come from. The place of the people who have known our ancestry for thousands of years. I start with that because I feel like the connection that has to be made, and I felt it in this class from other presenters, and I can hear it in the words that they share. And I feel like connection that we have to our place is rooted in something deeper than you can explain to anybody. I feel like the connection in my homeland, in my place of birth, in my place of being, is a different level than I can explain to someone who's not from here. And I feel like I bring that back home in many different ways, and I bring that to my work in many different ways as well. And I think what's brought it back around to me is doing this work with the Sustainable Southeast Partnership of a holistic approach to how we work in collaboration and expectations of going forward and trying to help with the long-term and success of our communities. I think the more we look at these kind of connections here with the SSP and talking about how we work and what we work for is a different approach than I've seen in many places. However, after hearing that last presentation by Carolina, I could see many similarities and many of the same kind of thoughts and processes that we've talked about in the SSP in a different format, right? All of this on the screen is the SSP. These are the people of the place. These are the people of the communities. And these are the people doing the things that they love. And you see there's a lot of culture rooted in it. There's a lot of resources rooted in it. There's a lot of people smiling. There's a lot of ancestry. There's a lot of history. And I think part of the SSP, and a big portion that I've been really trying to move forward on, is connecting those to a different level. Part of our approach at the SSP is looking at communities and asking them what they need in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to grow. And I think part of our community out approach is part of the aspect of being able to be there on the ground and look at how we approach problems in communities. I've heard it many times over this conversation of this 6 classes of we have all the answers, but us connecting the dots is where we keep getting held up in. Us being able to move forward at the speed of trust, which is one of my favorite sayings since I've been working here, at the speed of trust with all of these outside organizations. And I think looking forward, trying to figure out how or where or why, the answer's always been here. It's the people of the place, the people who know the resources, the people who feel, breathe, and live on the land. But it's also the land knowing that it needs us as well, to be stewards, to be resource managers, to be collectively working together in order for everyone to survive, land included, resources included. And I think the collective approach that we take at the SSP really takes that all into effect. I'm just giving you a little history on the SSP before I jump into why I have Mike and Marco here, as to see how we work together, and seeing that going forward, you can see through all of these different processes here on this screen, whether it's carving, fishing, dancing, I think we even have some, shellfish monitoring and testing and soil collecting there. All of this is the work. And I've seen that in the last slide, one of the last couple of slides that Carolina presented on there. And I really appreciated that, because the work is many shapes and forms. It's not just us on Zoom. It's not just papers being wrote. It's not laws being written. It's us living our best life going forward, looking at how we can make our lives better. And we can look at the 7 generations past us, right? It's not just about me. There's no legacy for me here. It's about my kids doing the same thing that I did growing up, and that their kids can do. And I think that's the big lasting effect that I really bring to the table here. And I'm really fortunate to work for such a great organization as Spruce Root, to be able to express that in many different ways through the different organizations and projects that we do. So we're a dynamic collective impact group. That is what the SSP is. We gather up folks from around the region, from many communities ranging from Yakutat down to Heidelberg. And ever so much we're growing. I think when we first started, we had about 100 people in our emailing list. Now I think we're close to 300. We use these impact network ideology in order to strengthen our perspective on culture, ecology, and economic resilience across Southeast Alaska. And what I mean by that is our community out approach, like I said earlier, is looking at the community and asking them what they want. I think the main portion of what we're trying to do is figure out a way to change the script that's been always used in these communities. Not looking at someone come to parachute in and say, oh, it looks like you need some economic boost. Here's $1 million to start a timber plant or a kelp plant or a oyster farm, right? What does the community want and need right now? And our approach is looking at that and looking at this vibrant way of life that we've had in Southeast, and many regions. I can see the same thing, right? I think we're all saying the very similar words of the people of this place know how to thrive here. Let us be the guides on this direction and giving you the purpose here of what we're trying to do. So here's our breakdown of how the SFP works, okay? So we have the steering committee who gives us the high level guidance, the big ball ideas, the help me with the budget. Then there's me. And below that, we have on our right, we have the regional catalysts who work on different mindsets and different areas of emphasis. Indigenous guardianship, who's Marco, the food security catalyst, energy, storytelling, regenerative tourism, economic development, and natural resources. All of these things we understand have to be working together in order to make a community thrive and develop and live long, right? So we have our catalysts our community catalysts on the right, who are the actual boots on the ground. They're the people that make it work. They're the people that we reach out to and look for direction and guidance in order to make all of this follow through happen, right? There are boots on the ground and the people who have the connections in the communities, right? We understand that in order to work through these communities, we have to be able to have direct connection and hear exactly what they're saying. I think part of the mission that we also do involves many different aspects, and youth is definitely one of them. But also looking at an economic kind of lens that we try to really fulfill how we're moving towards building ourselves up and able to make everything work in a community in a way that the community is leading and nobody else. There's no other dictation from us. We have zero authority for them in saying what they want to do and how they want to do this. And like I said, we span from Yakutat all the way down to Heidelberg and Kasan. And I think moving through our local ways of knowing and doing and really building the robust relationships that we do has all taken time. Over the last 11 years, that's how long the SSP has been around. Over the last 11 years, we've been looking at different approaches and different ways to come in together. And I think the model that we found to really work to get a lot of momentum and a lot of backing from communities is making sure that we have more than one community organization involved. Understanding that I have a tribal background, I really push for tribes to be at the table with us. But I also understand that the city has to be involved in a way, shape, or form. And if you're familiar with the region and you guys have village corporations as well, right? The village and regional corporations need to be involved, as well as the regional tribal cooperative here. So getting all of these people in order to work with the whole gamut of people from Yakutat down to Heidelberg takes an immense amount of work, and the amount of work and trust that has to be built from the walls of colonialism, resource extraction, boarding schools, the grab-alls that we've lived through in the 80s and 90s, all of those walls and barriers that have been put up artificially now have to be broke down by us in order for us to make sure that these communities and this region is thriving. And that is the work. The work is creating those relationships. The work is communicating back and forth every day and taking one step forward and two steps back from time to time. I think what we really look for and try to assess is a way of life that's new and also old, right? A way of life looking for economic sovereignty, for food sovereignty, but also being able to keep up with the rest of the world and maintain our place. And I think through the SSP, we've been trying to do that in a different way and a different approach. And over the course of the last 10 years, many a times have we thought about how we can bring more folks to the table, how we can bring actual resource management, co-management, stewardship, and really push the boundaries of sovereignty. And through those discussions and many meetings, we got to a place where this is where Marco and Mike come in. this is where the Indigenous Guardians Network, which is about a year old, a little over a year old, and we're looking at an approach to make it so the government can't ignore us anymore. Making so the data that we gather is region-wide and regionally tells the story, right? Not just one species, right? That was a very key, important element I seen in that last presentation. Not one species management, region-wide ecological management. And I think that's a great sidestep into how we look at this going forward. And, you know, I think all of this started at a meeting talking about we should have this happen. We should go check out the BC in the British Columbia. They have a Guardians Network down there. Let's take a trip down there. That's where this conversation started. And here we are about 3 years later. Our Guardians Network is up and running. And Marco, this is where I would like for you to talk about like the mission and vision and a little bit of history about your job and the Guardians Network here.
Sure, thanks, Ralph, and thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Marco Banda, as Ralph said, Regional Resource Specialist for Central Council, Tlingit and Haida. Honored to be here and to be addressing you today. So yeah, I was hired on as just a small piece in this development of the Indigenous Guardians Network here in Southeast Alaska. And I think the first thing I kind of want to say is that I want to take something from the previous day's presentation by Copper. He said something that really kind of resonated with me, and it was trust is more important than the end result. That really rang true with me, and I think that, and when we started this network and we started kind of piecing it together and bringing, you know, the regional corporations, federal entities, tribes into this, we wanted to make sure to include voices of the tribes, whether it's the environmental departments of the local tribe down to the community members. And we wanted to say, well, what is our vision? What is the vision for the region here? We came up with these two words. Some may say it's relatively simple, but this is not a simple task. Restoring balance is our main vision here. And we're going to do that in a few different ways. And all those ways are coming into fruition now. We've had the grand opportunity and the honor to build these relationships with entities. And as we all know here, building relationships is not an easy task. It's all part of the overlapping umbrella of healing. And we can do that. I believe we truly come into our own. So as you can see here, we point out our mission. We thought long and hard about this. First and foremost, the Indigenous Guardians is set up as a support system for communities, community members, tribal members here in Southeast Alaska. We start off that way, but we actually, as we go on and this vision continues to grow, we see Indigenous Guardians in every community here in Southeast Alaska. More so to the effect that making guardians a profession is the probably the longer term goal in this. And so as we strive to do this, we learn lessons along the way. I believe that my role here is to kind of grab everybody, put them in a room and say, hey, let's talk about this. And I think that open discussion is key to this relationship. Ralph, is there anything else you wanted me to go into?
No, I think that covers a lot of it, right? I think a big portion of it is looking at how, you know, how can we help support the work that's happening already, right? Because there's so much work that's already happening between the different tribes. How can we help support that and increase the strength of our statements as we go forward as tribal governments, as communities, as individuals? How can we increase the validity behind that without having to change the system? Because we're changing it on our own, right? We're not waiting for the system to change. We're changing that aspect on our own, right? And I think the big aspect of that, and that's where, you know, Mike comes in. Mike, you're our Forest Service partner, right? And I think I say that heavily, partner, because they're an absolute partner in this project and moving forward. And I think we have a one-time kind of really big agreement that happened with the Forest Service. And Mike, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and kind of the role behind it of the Forest Service.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Ralph and Marco. Appreciate the intro words that you guys did. The Forest Service, is embedded, if you look back at Ralph's map, embedded in all these same communities. And, years ago when we formed the Alaska Coastal Rainforest Center, we started looking at ways to work out partnerships and cross-boundary data collection schemes and other things similar to that. And during these last 10 years, when Ralph and a whole cadre of other people built up this relationship, this trust, there was this hope that an Indigenous Guardians network could be formed and it could work kind of collaboratively in partnership with the Forest Service, especially in and amongst all these different communities, for things like adaptation planning, for things like shared stewardship, for things like heritage, things like traditional ways of life, or as what's known as subsistence. It got to the point a couple of years ago where we happened upon a little bit of money and a long-term relationship between our regional forester and the president of Central Council. And everybody got together and decided that we could try and form an Indigenous Guardians network, a formal network, which kind of came to play in a very different way if anybody else is a federal employee and the way normal agreements and contracts are laid out. This one had an air of nebulousness, if you will, as the program developed and was founded. It gave us an opportunity to hire great people like Marco and others. It gave us a chance to work collectively with the SSP in a much stronger and more strategic way. And it gave us a little bit of time to allow the native forest partnerships to unfold in Hoona and in Cake, where we had had some great successes figuring out together what some of the major projects would be on the ground that would serve and address all the people in the region. So we were able to do that, and we hope to mimic those great efforts in Hoona and in Cake and bring them forward and develop this agreement where we could reach out across all of these borders, 18 tribal communities, governments, non-tribal lands, and we founded this agreement nigh on 2 years. And then we sat in the room week after week, I would say, or the Zoom room, week after week, forming and storming and trying to figure out how do we get to our normal and how do we get to perform. And while that was happening, if you don't mind, I'll just kick on this just a little bit, Ralph. While that was happening, the Seacoast Trust was formed, a partnership which brought a lot more energy into the room from other sources. And the Southeast Alaska Sustainability Strategy was formed, which is one USDA approach, which brings rural development, NRCS, and the Forest Service together to, again, work more collaboratively and in partnership with those across the region. And it's even, as a planner for the Forest Service, and I don't deal necessarily with each of the small little projects that are going on, but more the larger planning entities, the legal aspects of a land management plan and things of that nature. We have management areas, but nowhere in this great country of ours do we have co-management areas. And when the Tongass revision comes into play, it would be certainly very nice if we've gone far enough along in our Indigenous Guardians network and built things forward in a way that we could have co-management areas across our region. And I think that's really where, you know, the dynamic collective that Ralph mentioned comes into play. That's where the speed of trust comes into play. And, you know, we're just real hopeful and happy and engaged and present and learning from each other. And we hope that the federal government in this region can be an example to the rest of the country and its collaborative nature with tribes, tribal communities, people of all color, people of all places. And I'll leave it there and kick it back to you, Ralph. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Mike. That was a complete angle. I had to stop my screen share to make sure I got my final slide in the way I wanted it to happen. Just so looking at time, I think we're getting close. But you know, I think what we're trying to emphasize is a new approach, a new style of collaboration with the federal government that hasn't happened in certain ways and on certain levels. And I think we have been very successful, especially with what Mike was talking about, the SAS initiative, and being able to have a seat at that table and have a voice that was heard. It's something that hasn't always been there with a relationship between tribes and the federal government. And I actually felt like we were heard in many ways and shapes and forms through the discussions that happened in Juneau about a month ago, I think. But you know, our job at the SSP and with the Guardians Network now is bringing together different agencies to help them find the yes or ways to move forward, right? That's what Mike was talking about. Progress over perfection, right? That's one of our mantras. Continually look for new ways and opportunities to bring opportunities and development solutions to the regions, like the Build Back Better regional collaboration, the RISE grant, the SAS initiative. We are continually looking at the ways at the forefront of co-management, at community out planning, not community in, right? To look at different ways to decolonize the work and give it back to the people of the place. We're looking at different ways for the government to be able to join in just ways that haven't happened before, to put aside the layers of democracy. And that's our history and our vision, right? And our last thing that I really love is we are looking at ways to change philanthropy, right? We're a nonprofit. We work solely in Southeast, but we're looking at changing the way philanthropy looks at our region and at our communities. Not just parachuting in and dictating what they want. They're coming in at a holistic approach and hearing that, oh, we're going to let the community decide and put aside our own agendas in some way, shape, or form and move forward through that, and that's okay with us. And I think this kind of approach and this kind of momentum that we're building through that is actually building a lot in these last couple of years, especially with the Seacoast Trust coming online, which is absolutely amazing, and partners like Mike and Sea Alaska and a bunch of conservationists such as Andrew Tomes at Sitka Conservation Society, the Nature Conservancy. All of these great folks come together and give us the energy that we need to continually grow and move forward. And I'll leave it there, Carrie. I don't want to get long-winded here.
No, it's, oh, hold on.
There we go. Apologies. We have a couple of screens going in one room. Sorry for the echo. But Gunishish, Hawa, Ralph, very far from being long-winded, very much appreciate your perspective, your sharing, and your work. Marco, Mike, again, Gunishish, Hawa, what we're all sitting here in the Intertribal Resource Commission room, you know, saying, what if the National Park Service was funding Indigenous Guardians Network here on the lands of the Atna people, and such amazing groundbreaking work. So again, Gunishish and Hawa for that model. It really is groundbreaking, and everyone is breaking ground in so many new places, as we heard with Carolina. And so as a team, you know, Cheese Cook, myself, Hannah Marie, and Liana, we really wanted to round out with ICC and with you at the Sustainable Southeast Partnership, just to have, you know, you, the Forest Service and the tribe on the screen together doing the work. So again, thank you for giving your time and for sharing. So we have a couple things to do before we move forward in our last time together. And one of those is, if everybody would like to share in the chat while we're doing Q&A with Ralph and Mike and Marco, I wanted to open it up for a question or two. So if you want to put your hand up for that. But if you can share one word in the chat of what this series has meant for you, what it's been like to participate in this 6-part series. We'd love to capture that in the chat and hear from all of you as we begin to wind down in our last hour together. So that's one thing we wanted to accomplish. And thank you, Liana. Put one word, please describe in the chat how participating in this series has made you feel and meant for you. And I see enlightening and connective, life-giving, and some all coming across in the chat. So as everyone shares, I just want to check in for any questions. Do we have any questions for Ralph and Mike and Marco? And I had one really briefly, and maybe it was clarified, and I'm sorry if I missed that. Is the agreement for the Indigenous Guardians Network from the Forest Service, does that include funding? Was that a funding mechanism?
It was, yeah, it was. It was $455,000 on an original agreement plus a modification. Really meant to get the new hires in place and start the planning process in and amongst all the communities and get some boots on the ground. It's a multi-phase process, not most agreements as is this one is limited to 5 years. And as you can see, we've got a lot more money through the philanthropy and other resources that have come in that Ralph has been part and parcel assisting with. So does that help, Ralph?
Yeah, right on. And I love changing that perspective on philanthropy as well that you shared, Ralph. I know that we've been engaged in some of that work as well in statewide perspectives. The very colonial model of philanthropy to tell Indigenous peoples and people of color how to fix their problems, where people have the solutions to their own problems if we just give them the resources and tools to do so. So I really appreciated that as well. I'm a little overwhelmed at the same time hearing all of the words in the chat. They're so beautiful. And just want to check in any other questions for Ralph, Marco, and Mike at this time. I have a million little technical ones, but we might have to do that again later. And I'd love to have you share more in our tribal governance and stewardship classes. So now I can bug Ralph more to do that, because they are exceptional models and partnerships that, I think that a road show to show other, especially federal agencies, what the opportunities and possibilities are, if you're willing. I'd love to highlight that.
before I go though, I think, that comes at a great time of saying, like, having the Forest Service agreement signed by the tribe and the regional forester was a very historical moment, and the history behind the Forest Service and the tribes of the region have a very heavy, dark space, right? So the energy behind that and the meaning behind that was completely different than it could have been, and it was monumental. I think it was downplayed because of the pandemic. I think we would have had huge celebration knowing that this collaboration was going to be set into play. And, I think it just opened up so many doors, like Mike was talking about, all those one USDA opportunities, our direct relation between us having such a good collaboration partnership with the Forest Service. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Chief, Hawa, Ralph, and thank you for highlighting that. I believe we mentioned that at the beginning of the course, that the Forest Service burned the fish camps and the villages of your people. And we have, as Chief Cook pointed out, we've really covered everything from Indigenous-led land planning, yes, but reconciliation, truth, healing, and reconciliation efforts, partnerships, worldviews, and tangible results through best practices. So we've really covered the gamut because it is all related. It is all the work, and it is a celebration of healing to see the tribes and the Forest Service of Southeast come to this place when it was adversarial, violent, and militaristic, quite honestly, throughout history. So to see you and Marco and Mike next to one another on my screen today gives me great hope for the 7 generations ahead and for the children. So I just can't say Hawa and Gunishish enough to you for being brave enough to form those relationships and to grow that trust, because it is uniquely brave to do so. I should warn everyone, one of the things that we would really like to do before we move into our breakout groups is the group screenshot. So we'd love to see as many of you on screen as possible. And hopefully Hannah Marie, Liana can capture that. So if everybody is willing to turn on their videos, I see you all arriving. And hopefully, Hannah Marie, you're always on top of everything. Are you able to do a screenshot for us?
Yes, I am. So when people are ready, I'll give us a little countdown. All right. And
Okay.
Yeah,
and
more screens turning on.
yeah, I see them. I'm trying to get up my screen as wide. Okay.
And capture more people in our room.
Yes, Karen, make sure.
Y'all wave too and smile and be happy.
Yeah. All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hi, everybody. We're real people.
They're on camera.
You got it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for allowing us to capture this moment. It has meant a lot, of course, to us as an organizing team, but really us as a collective it is something rather overwhelming and phenomenal. And I do see Karen's, of course, I'm sitting here with Karen. Her word in the chat was finally. Finally, we come to this day and this truth and healing and reconciliation that we see in Southeast in this partnership. And so finally is a good word for that. So it is 3:15, and we want to send you into your breakout groups for some concluding dialogue. And then we can come back and wrap up our time together. And so I have a question here in the chat for everyone. What opportunities exist in your work to uplift and center Indigenous voices, Indigenous knowledge, and Indigenous decision-making? And as Liana has, so bravely put, how do we take that on individually? How do we apply that to our own lanes? And how do we get to a place of saying yes for progress in specific ways? So that is the final question we pose to you and to your breakout groups. And so we'll do that again for about 25 minutes. Half an hour, so we have some time to come back together and debrief. So with that, Hannah Marie will send you off, and you should have some invitations to join your breakout groups, and we can have one here in the Atna room as well. Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. Getting people trickling in. Ooh, everyone's soaking up that last 30 seconds, it seems. That's a good sign.
I think this is the first breakout group I was in where we actually just like proactively wrapped up and just didn't just keep going and get cut off.
I feel like that's a good Zoom skill sometimes in our day and age. Hard to cram everything in.
Mhm. Maybe we should hit record in a minute. I just don't want to forget.
I think we already got it. Carrie snagged it.
Oh, we are recording. Okay. Great.
I think that's everyone.
I think we have a few rooms that, yeah, they haven't officially closed,
Oh.
right? Or maybe not. Oh. Okay, I think we are good, right, Hannah Marie? Okay.
Everyone closed on my end.
Okay, great. Welcome back, everyone. So hi, Liana here. We're kind of rotating different facilitating roles among our collaborators on this. So I'm just going to help us close out our day and our series. First, just a little bit of business items before we share from our breakout groups and then close out the day. But we mentioned in the last class that we have a short evaluation that we have through a Google form that we invite everyone to fill out. And this is your opportunity to provide us feedback about the series. So Hannah Marie just posted the link to that in the chat, and we're going to email that out as well. So feel free to open it now, and so you'll have the tab open to remind you to fill it out. We'd really love your feedback so that we can also, as we move forward with this and hopefully provide additional learning opportunities and events, we definitely appreciate your feedback to improve our work. And also just FYI, if anyone is taking the course for credit through UAF, you're going to get a second feedback form that's specific to the university that goes out for all courses. So Carrie, who's officially the instructor on that, would really appreciate it if those who are registered for credit could fill that evaluation out. It should be quick and easy. So that's why you might be getting 2 evaluations. So for the next 10 minutes or so, we'd love to hear from you guys. You can share out anything that you heard or that was discussed in your breakout groups. And also, if you just have thoughts you want to share, since we are coming to a close in this series, but certainly not to a close in this general, topic, we'd love to just hear anything that you feel moved to share with the group. And feel free to just jump in, or you can use the raise hand function.
Well, I might jump in. This is Jean at Yukon Parks in Whitehorse. Sorry, my mind's already going to the course evaluation, and the one thing that surprises me, I've really enjoyed, learning what's going on and what other folks are doing. Really enjoyed the breakout groups. I'm surprised how much everything on the Alaska side of the border is still just a mystery of acronyms to me. It's like and I'm sure the opposite is true for the folks on the Alaska side. It's a real barrier because we just speak such different languages. It's that one's, I'm still a bit flummoxed by it.
I think Donna was holding up what is that, like a guide to like acronyms in Alaska? Is that what you had? Yeah, it's a little bit fuzzy, but like it looks like a whole entire like page, like list of all of our acronyms. Yeah. Yeah, we have to remember to speak sometimes in full words.
Well, and it's just, it's not just like literally the acronyms, but just like the whole basis for the work that we do is so different across that imaginary line. It's weird how true that is.
Yeah.
Because like when we talk in this kind of forum, like, we're all trying to do the same things and we're facing similar challenges, but it seems like our whole way of our systems are so weirdly different.
Well, as someone based in the US who moved to Alaska, I had to learn a whole new system, a whole new culture, a whole new history, and a whole new way of thinking when I moved here. And then I started working in Canada, and that was a whole other learning. So it is a reminder that all of us still have a lot more to learn about one another. Are there other takeaways that folks want to share around also maybe any light bulb moments for you in this course, and especially thinking about in your own work, what you might be feeling is something, in your own lane that you feel like you want to, or that you could take on to help move this forward in terms of Indigenous-led planning and stewardship? Yeah, Trent.
Like, how do I raise my hand in here? I think it's a good reminder that I love all these conversations. I really appreciate them and people sharing. But in partnering, it's really easy to just treat somebody the way you want to be treated. Like, that's easy. I know what I want. It's a lot harder to treat somebody the way they want to be treated, and that takes getting to know them, taking time. And I think we in our jobs don't, well, sorry, in my experience in work I've done, it seems like we don't value that as much as maybe we should, and we don't make a lot of time for it. But I keep learning every time we go through this, I'm like, we need to do that more. And then I get caught in, well, this is the old way of, this is how we do things, right? But that doesn't make it right. And there's a lot more space for that opportunity than I think maybe we realize if we just take that time and accept that that's okay, right? I mean, I'm working in a government system. I'm supposed to produce metrics. I'm supposed to produce outcomes. But that investment up front in the people and the communities and the relationships are going to take me so much further over time. So I just encourage folks. I'm not much of an activist, but kind of sound like one here a little bit. You know, take that time. Look at kind of what are those gray areas at your job, and how do you or where do you have opportunities to make that space? Because it's out there. I know it's out there. I experienced it in every job I've ever had, and I've moved around a few times, so it's there. I just appreciate hearing from everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Trent. And just a reminder that people made those systems that sometimes make us feel like, oh, we can't do anything about it. We're stuck. But people can unmake those systems and make new ones. And we can advocate for changing those systems. Are there others that want to share? I think we have time for one more comment.
I want to jump in.
Sure.
I think I look forward to the deeper dive in the I already did my survey, so already on it. I appreciate that follow-up question of looking at a deeper dive into a second follow-up class. I think that would be great, because I think like we just like scraped the surface here, and it's very exciting to hear other work happening very similar to what I'm doing, and I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Ralph. That's really great to hear, because when we, you know, part of what I wanted to do, or when we talked about closing this out, is I wanted to just come back to the origin story of this work. And, you know, the Northwest Boreal Partnership, we've had an interest in facilitating land planning in a way that's more holistic and collaborative and equitable. And we had some, you know, we were moving forward with doing an in-person gathering with Carcross-Tagish First Nation in May of 2020. Obviously, you all know why that didn't happen. But one of the things we talked about from the beginning as a vision and purpose for this is it would be a learning opportunity for those who are less familiar with what Indigenous-led land planning and stewardship looks like, but also for those who are in it, like you, Ralph, you know, for Carolina, for others that are leading this. Sometimes it's just so important to hear from others who are doing similar work, and to know that, you know, that there are like-minded individuals, that this is a whole network and community of people making transformative, inspiring changes. And it's so important to feel like uplifted and supported within this larger, you know, community that really goes across the globe. But it's cool too, just to hear from each other across the border, you know, because we share our lands, we're neighbors, you know, between Alaska and Western Canada. There are, you know, deep ancestral familial ties. So it's just hearing some of the comments from those who are invested in this work and how meaningful this has been for you makes my heart burst with joy to just be a part of that and to create that space. And I'm really, really grateful to
Liana.
Welcome back.
what's so important about work. What's that? Oh, can you hear me?
You cut out
for a second.
Sorry, my internet connection's unstable. Thanks, GCI. But I was just thanking my, collaborators, Chiskuk and Carrie and Hannah Marie, working with this team, the four of us, we've gotten even closer. And I think the friendships that are made from this work are one of the most beautiful outcomes. And that relationship building, it's not only important for our work, but just like we were put on this earth not to just do work, but to live our lives and be full humans and spirits together. So I'm so grateful that my job that I get paid for means that I get to bring more meaning into my life and to others. So thank you, my awesome collaborators. I love you very much. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of you guys showing up to this really awesome and sacred space. Yeah, I really hope we can continue this. I'm sure we will continue this. And based on your evaluations, we'll figure out how to do that. And of course, this is a co-created thing. So we welcome others to join us in continuing to create these spaces for sharing and connecting. So with that, I'm gonna hand things over to Chiskuk. She's gonna close us out with a song.
Yeah, I'm not going to sing because that would be bad, but I'm going to share a song. This is a blessing. This is a prayer song, a Yupik prayer song that was made right in the beginning of the pandemic to bring people together. So just enjoy. All right, Cleana. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you at the next series.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Janan.
Thank you so much.